Thanks everyone for joining this virtual stakeholder session today. The purpose of the session is to gather input for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, NJDEP, on potential priority actions to address climate change emissions in the transportation sector. My name is Jean Herb. I run a Center of Research and Practice at the Rutgers University School, and along with Marjorie Kaplan, I co-direct the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center, which was established by a law signed 3 years ago. And the Resource Center provides support and service throughout New Jersey to address climate change here in the Garden State. My colleague Marjorie Kaplan, the other co-director for the center, is typing the website address for the Resource Center into the chat, so you can learn more about us. Before we get started, I want to take just a couple minutes and cover some important housekeeping items. First, there's a simultaneous Spanish translation being provided for this webinar. If you'd like to join that simultaneous Spanish translation portion of the webinar, go to the bottom of your screen, click on the globe icon, and select Spanish. I'm going to just take a minute and pause to let any of you who are switching over to the interpretation portion to make that transition. A second housekeeping topic that I want to cover is that several of you expressed interest in using closed captions as part of this webinar. Matt, can I ask you to just take a minute and explain to everyone how to use the closed captioning feature on the webinar?
Absolutely. So down towards the bottom center of the screen, a little bit to the right, you should see a button that says Show Captions. Just click that and they will appear.
Thanks, Matt. The third housekeeping topic I want to mention is that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording, along with the PowerPoint presentation from today, will be posted on the NJDEP's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program website. And Marjorie is typing that website into the chat box. We'll type it in several times for people who join the webinar late and don't get to see it in the chat. So that's an important website for you to become familiar with. Today, we'll be asking your input in several ways. First, if you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand and we'll call on you and unmute you so that you can ask your question or offer a comment. Since we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to offer their comments or their questions, we'll ask you to be straightforward and efficient in providing your comments. Second, we'll also be using the chat box today. If you put a comment or question in the chat, Marjorie will be reading it out loud so that our Spanish interpreters can interpret it. We'll also be using the chat box to type in links to different websites that we think might be useful to you. To access the chat box, scroll down to the bottom of your screen and click chat. It's important that when you type something into the chat, that you chat to everyone, okay, not just to hosts and panelists. When you chat to everyone, your communication and the answers will be captured in the transcripted recording of the meeting and made available publicly. If you're asking a very long question, it may be longer than the character count in the chat box. And so it might be best if you have a long question to raise your hand and be asked to unmute. Please note that if anyone participating today is asking a question in Spanish, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you, and you can ask your question in Spanish and our interpreters will translate it into English for us. Thank you so much. So now that we've covered housekeeping, let's begin the conversation. The Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program is a national two-phase program funded by the Inflation Reduction Act and managed through the United States Environmental Protection Agency. In a few minutes, I'll be handing this over to Doug Benton from the New Jersey DEP, who will provide you with an overview of the CPRG program. A few things that are important that I want to emphasize in terms of what Doug will be presenting is that the CPRG program is going to be very highly focused on near-term measures that can be implemented quickly to help New Jersey achieve its 2030 goal of 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So think about this first conversation that we're having today as informing this more short-term establishment of a priority climate action plan, a PCAP, which will identify those shorter-term measures for which additional funding will become available from US EPA. The overall work being led by NJDEP that will be incorporated into the PCAP will focus on 6 priority sectors. Transportation is one of them. Others include buildings, electric generation, food waste, halogenated gases, and natural working lands. This session is particularly focused on the topic of transportation. The input that DEP will receive from you will inform their development of the PCAP, the Priority Climate Action Plan. And the focus for today, again, is on near-term priorities. Again, you can go to that NJDEP Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program website, which Marjorie is retyping into the chat box, to find recordings and presentations from the other 4 webinars that were held on other topics prior to this one. So all of the recordings, all of the recorded transcripts, and all of the presentations can be found on that website. That same DEP website is a valuable resource for stakeholders for other reasons. On that site, you can find the work plan that NJDEP submitted to US EPA for its work under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. And you can also find a portal where you can submit written comments following today's webinar. In addition, so you're able to give us input through that portal as well as through today's webinar. DEP is asking for comments by December 4th so that it can turn around the revisions and its thinking and priorities for the PCAP in the tight time frame that is imposed upon it by US EPA. Our agenda today is straightforward. In a minute or two, I will turn things over to the team from DEP, led today by Doug Benton, which will give a presentation of about 20 to 30 minutes on potential priority climate actions for the transportation sector that are under consideration by DEP for the PCAP. From there, we'll open it up to all of you to ask if you have any clarification questions on the DEP presentation for about 10 minutes. After clarification questions, we'll launch into a discussion for about an hour about your thoughts on potential priority climate actions related to the transportation sector, which I will facilitate. What I want to stress is that what we've noticed in the previous webinars on other sectors is that we keep encouraging participants to turn their questions into comments. Everyone keeps asking, is this going to be a priority? Is that going to be a priority? And what we'd like to hear from you is your comments on what you think should be priorities. Following the discussion, where we'll receive your comments, we'll turn it back over to DEP to give an update on next steps associated with their effort on this program. And then we'll turn it back to you to see if there's any other topics related to transportation that you want to raise. Again, it's important for me to remind you about going to the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program website, where, again, if you don't have the opportunity today to give your input, you can go there and, again, preferably by December 4th, enter your input into a portal that's there. So now I'd like to turn it over to Doug Benton from the New Jersey DEP. Doug is a research scientist in the Bureau of Climate Change and Clean Energy, and Doug is helping to lead the development of the state's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. He's joined by several other members of NJDEP, as well as the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, and to not just give you a presentation on NJDEP's work in this space, but also to answer your questions and hear your comments. So Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Marjorie and Rutgers, for starting us off. I'm Doug Benton. I'm going to lead off the state presentation this morning, or this afternoon. I'm joined by my colleague, environmental planner Zenon Tekcharny from the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, as well as my colleagues from the DEP, Claire Sugihara and Gil Botham, from New Jersey DEP's Bureau of Mobile Sources. Thanks for being here, you guys. I'm going to start off by giving a short overview of what the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program opportunity is and how New Jersey is approaching it. And then I'm going to pass it over to Zenon to talk about how NJTPA is approaching the CPRG. And then my colleagues at DEP are going to take a deeper dive into New Jersey's transportation emission sector and share more background info and some of the initial potential opportunities that the state has identified for its statewide priority climate action plan. So we'll jump right into this. If you've attended any of our other stakeholder sessions, these slides will be somewhat familiar, but an overview of what the CPRG is. The CPRG is a Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. It's a nationwide two-phase grant program funded by the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, and the grant program is administered by the EPA. The first phase of the grant program is already underway. It provided non-competitive planning grants to states and local governments to provide or to develop a series of climate action plans focused on mitigating greenhouse gases. And the second phase is a $4.6 billion competitive grant program, which has also already launched. This launched in September. The EPA has released their notice of funding availability for these competitive implementation grants. But through these grants, funding will be dedicated to implementation-ready greenhouse gas reduction measures that are identified in these priority climate action plans. So part of the phase one of the CPRG are these planning grants. And so because of New Jersey's population density, we were fortunate enough to have received 4 discrete planning grants covering different portions of our state. So New Jersey DEP received a planning grant to develop a statewide plan. That's shown in blue on the map here. And then the NYC Economic Development Corporation, in partnership with the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, or NJTPA, received a planning grant as well, which covers 12 counties in New Jersey, stretching from Sussex to Ocean County, and that's shown in pink on the map. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission in Pennsylvania received a planning grant that covers a portion of Warren County, shown in yellow on the map. And then the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission received a planning grant that covers portions of 5 counties in New Jersey, shown in the green color on the map. So each of these entities will be producing climate action plans for their respective areas of New Jersey as part of this CPRG program. Needless to say, there's going to be, it's going to be important for coordination between and across all of these entities. And so, that's part of the reason why Zenon is joining us today in this meeting. So in an effort to do so, to do that coordination and to reduce potential stakeholder fatigue, we really want to encourage, if you are here attending this call representing a municipality or a county government or any other type of entity located in an area that's covered by both one of the statewide planning grants and one of these other regional planning grants in New Jersey, we encourage you to get involved in the planning efforts for both. We are going to use our state website, our CPRG webpage, which Jean and Marjorie dropped in the chat for us earlier, to co-promote stakeholder meetings and events throughout this process and ongoing into the future. So there are several different deliverable requirements for the CPRG planning grant program over the next 4 years. The first of which is this Priority Climate Action Plan, which we're referring to as the PCAP. This plan is due on March 1st. As per EPA's guidance, the PCAP is meant to focus on near-term implementation-ready greenhouse gas reduction measures. This is what the focus of our discussion today will be on. It's also important to note here that an entity can only apply for the implementation grant funding, so that funding from phase 2, for measures that are included in a PCAP. The second, looking into the future, the second deliverable is this comprehensive climate action plan, which is also going to be referred to as a CCAP. This is due in mid-2025, and in New Jersey, this is going to touch on all sectors and significant sources and sinks of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. And then finally, in 2027, the last deliverable is due, and this is a status report, which is going to report out to the EPA on the state's progress to date and any intended next steps or additional financial and staffing needs for the CPRG. So diving into the PCAP a little bit more, the EPA is requiring each PCAP to include several elements. So there's 4 required elements that are shown on the left side of the screen in dark blue, the greenhouse gas inventory being one of them. And New Jersey intends to include 2021 inventory in the PCAP using its existing methodology. Quantified greenhouse gas reduction measures are another requirement, and we plan to include our quantification of the expected emissions impacts from discrete measures that will be in the PCAP, similar to how we did so in the 80 by 50 report. Additionally, we're going to include a robust qualitative narrative about these co-benefits realized in low-income and disadvantaged communities from implementation of the measures. That'll include identifying co-benefits such as improvements to public health, resilience, decreased energy costs, and community beautification. So those will satisfy those middle 2 requirements on the left. And then we're also going to review of our authority to implement the measures and highlight any implementation challenges moving forward with these measures. And that's an important thing that we'd sort of like to hear feedback about what those barriers and challenges are to implementing potential measures in the transportation sector today. On the other side of the screen, we have a list of the encouraged elements in the PCAP. So the EPA is encouraging recipients of the planning grants to include these elements, but they are not ultimately required. New Jersey intends to include the first 4 items here in its statewide PCAP. So this includes emissions projections and reduction targets by sector, strategic insights on how the state anticipates to leverage federal funds along with these funds, and a workforce planning analysis for the PCAP. And New Jersey has identified 6 priority sectors for its priority climate action plan, focusing primarily on the big 3 sectors, which would be transportation, buildings, and electric generation greenhouse gas emissions, along with organic waste emissions, halogenated gases, and our natural and working lands, which serve as carbon sinks to help offset the state's emissions. So for each sector, here, only those 6 will be sectors included in the Priority Climate Action Plan. The Comprehensive Climate Action Plan will address all of the sectors and sources of emissions in New Jersey. So this is just a quick timeline or general overview timeline for the development of the Priority Climate Action Plan for New Jersey statewide plan. You'll see we are currently in this green section where we are doing stakeholder events to gather input on the priority measures that should be included in the PCAP, with the intention of releasing a draft PCAP framework in January for public comment. And then, of course, the deadline for submission to the EPA of our state's PCAP is March 1st, 2024. The second phase of the CPRG grant program involves these implementation grants. So the implementation grants are open to several different types of entities. There's two main qualifications that an entity can meet to be able to apply for the funds. The first is that any of the entities who've received a phase 1 planning grant, so these are the entities that I showed in the map previously in New Jersey. So that's just NJDEP and the 3 regional organizations in New Jersey that receive those planning grants. So they can all apply for implementation grant funding. And then secondly, any other eligible entities, and eligible applicants are shown on the slide here. In New Jersey, this is mainly counties and municipalities who are applying to implement measures that are included in an applicable PCAP. And so when we say applicable PCAP, we're referring to a PCAP from any of those 4 New Jersey entities PCAPs. That was on the previous slide. It corresponds with the area that your eligible entity is within. So for example, if New Jersey DEP's PCAP included school bus electrification as a priority measure, then any municipality or counties throughout the state could apply for implementation grant funding to electrify their school bus fleets. Just an example. So this slide shows the 2 different grant processes happening simultaneously. It shows that all the implementation grant measures have to be included in the PCAP, or in a PCAP, but not all measures in the PCAP will be included in a given implementation grant application. So this is for those of us who are visual learners and wanted maybe a visual diagram to see the difference between the 2 concurrent parts of this CPRG happening. The EPA outlined a couple other sort of rules or stipulations. These eligible entities can only submit 2 lead applications, so they can submit an application as an individual. They can also submit an application as the lead of a coalition, which is defined as a group of 2 or more eligible entities. But eligible entities can be a partner in numerous coalition applications. Some other things the EPA has outlined as rules is that they're only going to be, or they won't be awarding funding to implement this. And coalitions are not allowed to submit multiple applications for the same set of greenhouse gas reduction measures using different lead applicants. And applications are going to be evaluated as a whole by the EPA and won't be assessed based on individual greenhouse gas reduction measures. Here is a snapshot of the main deadlines for the CPRG programs for the statewide plan development. The green is the implementation grant and the blue is the planning grant. I should say these are also the deadlines for the entire CPRG program, not just the state planning grant. So I'm going to pass it off now to Zenon to talk about NJTPA's planning process for the CPRG.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. As Doug mentioned, my name is Zenon, and I'm a principal planner in environmental planning at the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, NJTPA. Doug did a great job at explaining the CPRG program overall. It's very similar at the MSA level. But today I want to share some more information about the CPRG climate planning for the Newark, Jersey City Metropolitan Statistical Area, also called the New York, North Jersey MSA for short. EPA also gave entities and MSAs an opportunity to conduct targeted climate planning for the regions and to get more local. This MSA includes New York City, the Lower Hudson Valley, Long Island, Northern and Central New Jersey. And I'll show a map briefly showing the area. Just a little bit about the MSAs. The United States Office of Management and Budget delineates the MSAs. Core areas, so MSAs are core areas with substantial populations. So the US 2020 census was used to define this area. Pike County, Pennsylvania was originally part of the MSA, but is not included in this effort. So the NJTPA has partnered with the New York City Economic Development Corporation, the New York City Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, and the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council to work on this CPRG planning grant. I will provide some more information about this effort, but first, a little more information about NJTPA. So the NJTPA is the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the northern and parts of central Jersey. An MPO is a federally mandated and federally funded transportation planning agency comprising of representatives from our sub-regions as shown above. So we call these entities sub-regions and key transportation agencies. Congress created MPOs to give local elected officials a stronger role in guiding federal transportation investments. We primarily focus on transportation, but we sometimes also do broader work, as in the case of Together North Jersey, which was a previously federally funded planning grant to improve livability and sustainable communities in the region. The NJTPA is home to nearly 7 million people, about approximately 75% of New Jersey's population. We include 15 subregions, which include 13 counties and 2 cities, Newark and Jersey City. So next slide. So as mentioned, climate planning is being done for the New York, North Jersey MSA. This planning grant is very similar to the states regarding schedule and deliverables. There is an MSA effort to do climate planning regionally and more locally in order to see how things can be done more local. So EPA has referred to this level as of the planning grant as planning for the municipalities, but it's really more towards the region. And they typically mention the cities, but it's really broader. So in our case, New York City is leading the team and received the grant, and NIMTEC and New Jersey Transportation Planning Authority are partners on the project. The regions actually match up fairly similarly. However, Warren County is included in the Allentown MSA instead of our MSA. New York City is hiring a consultant to assist with this project and should be on board soon. This project is also being coordinated with the state's planning efforts, as mentioned by Doug. So we have developed this hub site to provide more information. We encourage people to check it out and to learn more. More information will be added in the future. Next slide. So this map shows the MSA, which includes 23 counties. 12 are in the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority region, and 10 are in the NIMTIC region, 5 of which are NYC. This map shows the border, the counties, and Justice 40 tracks. Justice 40 communities will receive preference for CPRG grants. The 40 means that 40% of the funding will go to these communities overall around the country. Next slide. So if you'd like to get involved in our MSA planning effort, you can go to our hub site and click the stakeholder form button and complete the form. We especially encourage those who represent governments and groups that are thinking about what could be done to reduce emissions quickly and equitably. To submit comments or ideas, click on the comments and ideas button on the hub site and complete the form. Comments and ideas can be strategies, measures, actions, and projects related to this planning process. And we will use that to inform the plan. So for example, it could be high level where you could say you'd like the plan to focus on X, or you could potentially mention a specific project that you would like to see implemented in your community. It would be good to submit here and also the state, because our priorities may be different than the state. And we encourage people to submit comments and ideas as soon as possible to inform the PCAP, as the deadline is March 2024. And sooner the better for the CCAP, but we have a little bit more time for that. And that's it from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Zenon. So now we're going to pass it back over to colleagues at the DEP to take a deeper dive into the New Jersey transportation emission sector. So without further ado, Gil and Claire, feel free to take it away.
All right, next slide, please.
Gil, I think you might need to talk a little bit louder.
Okay, not a
Okay,
problem.
thanks.
So my name is Gil Botham. I'm an EV policy analyst here at the DEP, and I'm just going to be walking you through some of the deep dives for the transportation sector analysis that we are doing for the CPRG grant. So we are really looking at 4 major pathways within transportation. Firstly is our classic transit, which includes most things that you think of as public transportation, including buses, rail, and really increasing ridership of those public transportation sectors. Next, we have active transportation. So that's really using your own 2 feet, biking, walking, anything with self-propulsion. And then we have electrification, which is everything that's not included in the first 2. Think of your personal vehicles, the commercial trucks, everything that is not publicly owned, but privately owned and running on either gas or diesel. We want to electrify those vehicles. And lastly, kind of tying it all together is the infrastructure that will support each and every one of these other pathways, because without the infrastructure, we will not be able to charge and utilize all the other different vehicles on the road. Next slide, please. So here you can see a bit of our emissions from the transportation sector. The graph on the left is from the 80 by 50 report, which you can find online. And here you can see that a good majority of our emissions from transportations come from light duty cars and light duty trucks. So the electrification pathway is, from the emission standpoint, the most vital. However, you can also see that commercial trucks is another major lion's share portion of emissions from the rest besides light duty vehicles. So not only are we focusing on making sure that we hit the correct vehicles, but we hit every vehicle that is emitting carbon in our state. So really looking at the different goals to kind of reach these emission reductions already in play. We have the advanced clean trucks and advanced clean cars. Both of those kind of look at the light duty trucks, the heavy duty trucks, and then the light duty cars respectively, as far as promoting electrification and requiring it at the state level. We also have the EV law within New Jersey that requires the state to not only build infrastructure, but ensure that it supports more of the niche cases of electrification, as you can see at the bottom there, including the overnight lodging and the multi-unit dwellings. So not just taking the typical single family house or commercial settings, and making sure that we electrify the entire state and all sectors within that state. Next slide, please. So we pull a lot of our understanding from the CPRG and the PCAP and the implementation grant from our existing plans. All of these plans are available online. Some of them inform us at a sector-wide scale. As you can see below each plan, we kind of state how and where we would utilize that. Others are more specific. The heavy and medium duty electrification and the infrastructure plan are more really diving into those specific sectors and what New Jersey wants to do in order to meet its emission goals. So for the next slide, please. We're looking a little bit into the actual transit. So again, really trying to support our current programs while thinking about upcoming programs that could be supported not only from the state level, but also from the local level. So we have the Transit Villages program, support for commuter van pools, and development of the Tap and Ride program. Really, we are trying to better utilize our existing infrastructure. By increasing efficiency of built infrastructure with these current programs, and you know, by and large, the upcoming programs, which includes increase of capacity and the promotion of transit-oriented development, we are able to really use the transportation that we have today to a better extent, and hopefully drive investment into the transportation so that if there is expansion in the future, there is funding for that expansion because there is actual demand coming from the state of New Jersey. So I'm going to hand it over to Zanan for the next slide.
Yeah, so hi again. So for the deep dive into active transportation, we're going to do a little bit differently, and I'm going to provide a little perspective from the MPO. MPOs do many studies and planning related to active transportation and help provide funding. DVRPC and South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization also have programs, so I recommend you check out their websites to learn more if you're in their areas. So what is active transportation? Active transportation includes walking, running, skating, riding a wheelchair, scootering, bicycling, or riding an electric bicycle. And shifting to active transportation is a great way to decarbonize. Active transportation is the cleanest and least carbon intensive way to move around. It's free and it's healthy. So, but using active transportation as a means of getting around is often inconvenient and dangerous. So we need to build better facilities and infrastructure for it. We also should be retrofitting our communities so people can use active transportation for their daily lives. So NJTPA has several programs to improve active transportation. One is the Sub-Regional Studies Program, which provides 2-year grants on a competitive annual basis to the 13 counties and 2 cities that represent NJTPA's board. And many of these studies are related to active transportation. Planning for emerging centers provides technical assistance to municipalities to create sustainable transit supportive and walkable communities and to develop comprehensive approaches to strategic planning at the local level. Complete Streets technical assistance supports municipalities by providing them with knowledge, skills, and resources to develop complete streets related solutions. And it can be used for a variety of projects such as bicycle plans, walking audits, and demonstration projects. And to identify state safety concerns, potential strategies, conceptual renderings, and visualize potential improvements and development of policy guidance. Then we also have partner programs. So these are programs that we work in collaboration with the Federal Highway Administration and our state's DOT. So one of those is Safe Routes to Schools program, which provides funding for projects and activities meant to enable and encourage children grades K through 12 to walk and bike safely to school. And the Transportation Set Aside program, which provides federal funding for community-based, non-traditional surface transportation related projects designed to strengthen cultural, aesthetic, and environmental aspects of the surface transportation. And lots of these transportation alternative projects can help with providing that infrastructure, which can lead to mode shift. The New Jersey, the NJTPA also recently finished our regional active transportation plan in June 2023, and which provides a blueprint to create safe, comfortable, and connected network for walking and biking across the region. And so, yeah, please check that out. It provides a nice vision for how people can use active transportation all around the region. And regarding upcoming programs, there is the carbon reduction program, which provides funding for all sorts of decarbonization in transportation, but also allows for funding for active transportation projects. So that's it.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to hand it over to Claire to finish up.
Great, yeah. So looking at electrification, the state's in the middle of launching a series of e-mobility programs, which will provide access to electric vehicles, specifically for community members who don't have access to their own personal vehicles. These programs are working to increase access to transportation, primarily targeting low and moderate income communities, where residents are disproportionately impacted by air pollution. So these programs include things like car share and also shuttle services. Also, for residents who do own their own vehicle, the state is offering financial incentives to help reduce the cost of purchasing an electric vehicle. So, for example, the Charge Up New Jersey program is offered through the Board of Public Utilities, and it provides up to $4,000 towards the purchase of an electric vehicle. The state is also focusing on reducing emissions from company-owned vehicles like school buses, transit buses, semi-trucks, and other heavy-duty vehicles. These vehicles often disproportionately impact low and moderate income communities, and these communities really have little or no control over these emissions. So we want to make sure that we're incentivizing them to become less polluting, so that they're impacting those communities less. To that end, we're always coming out with new programs, including an upcoming dedicated electric school bus program and a technical assistance program to help support fleets in making the transition to electric, aside from just the financial side of it. So this includes things like assisting with route planning and assessing charging needs, identifying financial incentives, and things like that. So a few different approaches to that. Next slide, please. This slide just quickly highlights the benefits of electric vehicles and how they're going to improve over time as the state transitions away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy sources. So on the left, you can see the electric generation mix in 2020, which has a high proportion of natural gas in it. But as we move forward to 2050, we move more towards renewables and less on fossil fuels. So the benefits will continue to increase over time. Next slide. Now, looking at charging infrastructure, this is really important to consider so that we can actually successfully move towards transportation electrification. Because of course, if you have vehicles, but no infrastructure, that's not going to work out. So the state is currently offering incentives for all types of charging. Public, workplace, and home charging infrastructure are offered at the state level. And these programs can typically be combined with utility make-ready programs, which are offered by the four main utility companies in New Jersey. And then moving forward, we're going to be focusing a lot on building out both corridor and community public charging under the federal NJDEP program, as well as with some state funding. And then we're also exploring opportunities to set up workforce development programs in conjunction with community colleges and vocational technical schools and the electricians unions. So that's something we're pretty excited about. And then, you know, those strategies help ensure that the benefits of job creation that are coming from all these different programs are actually benefiting the communities where the money is going towards. So. And then another program that the state is developing is piloting a bidirectional charging infrastructure program, starting with a few vehicle to building projects. So if you're interested in those types of projects, look out for that coming next year. And the next slide. So with all this in mind, we've developed a preliminary list of a few potential opportunities which the state has identified as being needed to decarbonize our transportation sector. So this is covering all the components that we talked about in the presentation, from charging infrastructure to vehicles, improving infrastructure for transit and walking and biking, and then also the supportive services that I talked about with technical assistance and workforce development. and just different ways to get the community involved in these projects. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to provide some examples that we may consider going forward. So we can get feedback on sort of which strategies you like, which ones you don't like, what we're missing, really any thoughts that you have. So again, these slides will be on the website, so you can take a look back at them at any time and see where we're at. Next slide, please. And then lastly, just a reminder that in addition to any verbal comments today, you can provide written comments and feedback for both North Jersey MSA and the statewide CPRG plans on our website. We do read all the comments that you post and take them into consideration when writing our plans. So anything, any feedback is really appreciated. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jean and Marjorie to take us through a discussion.
Thanks so much, Claire. Thanks, everybody. That was a really informative conversation. Thank you so much. So everyone, what we'd like to do is take about 10 minutes and just answer any kind of clarification questions on the presentation. And then from there, we're going to open it up for general questions, for comments from folks participating, for what you'd like NJDEP to consider as priorities. So while I'm turning myself around out of the sun, Marjorie, I'm gonna ask for you to let us know if you're seeing any clarification questions in the chat.
Yes, a ton. First, I think what I'm going to try to do here is I think Chris Sturm is here for under Zeke. Chris, I know you have to run, so did you want to ask your question?
Oh, thank you. That is so sweet, Marjorie. Well, we really appreciate this opportunity and appreciate all the work that all of you are doing. I guess I have, New Jersey Future prioritizes communities that are walkable and climate safe for everyone. And so we will emphasize equity in our comments. Electric vehicles are really important. I hope to buy one, but a lot of people in New Jersey can't afford them. And so one question or one comment suggestion would be to expand e-mobility to include subsidies for e-bikes. And we've done some research on that and can send you information. Another recommendation would be to look at some of the gaps that communities face, and I'm sure Zena knows these better than anyone, in accessing state and federal funding for active transportation. So a lot of times what we hear is that local officials don't have the time to even develop the feasibility for a project, say a new bike path from the new apartment complex to the high school. And without that feasibility and planning study, they can't even apply for the grant. If they get a grant from DOT, then they can reimburse themselves for engineering design costs, but those are different. So there's this gap at the beginning, which is especially a problem for lower income communities to access, the big dollars. And there's also a gap that they face in having the capacity to complete the application process and to monitor the project going through. And so we see this also on the water infrastructure side. It's a big issue. Just want to throw it out there. We will offer some suggestions on that.
Chris, can I interrupt you and just ask you? You can submit this in writing, but we have a lot of people. This period portion is to ask clarifying questions.
Oh, I thought that's what you were looking for. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Clarifying
Thank
question.
You.
Just a quick one.
Go for it, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, just a quick one is, how does what the MPOs are doing relate to what the DEP is doing in terms of how will you coordinate your plans? How will we know which one is most important to weigh in on, et cetera?
Well, and Chris or Zeke, I'll add to your clarification question, which is, will the comments that you offer on this webinar or through the portal be shared with for example, the MPO in addition to DEP? Doug, are you the best person to answer that clarifying question?
Yeah, I think we would definitely encourage you to submit your comments about the CPRG planning grant to the state, and submit those comments to both entities. I mean, we have set up monthly meetings with regional entities that have received CPRG planning grants. So we do touch base, and we have Zenon on the call today. But we would definitely encourage, if you have comments, if you have priority measures that you want included in an applicable PCAP, to submit those comments through both planning processes. And then the other thing that we intend to release a draft PCAP framework in around January in order to receive additional public comment on what's included in that preliminary draft, to then, rework that draft based on those comments. And so NJTPA would be able to review and potentially comment on that as well. And I know the EPA has encouraged planning grant recipients, entities, to publish a draft or release a draft of their plans for comment. So all of those planning grant entities should be releasing drafts for comment before the actual final PCAP is submitted to the EPA to sort of hopefully help coordinate. But it is a tight time frame. We recognize that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks, Doug. That was super helpful. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Doug said about submitting to both the state and the MSA. And, the priorities might be a little bit different. I think that both the state and the MSA, want to hear your thoughts, and, we'll take it in consideration in terms of influencing the plan. But yeah, how the plans turn out, I will see how that happens. But we're in close collaboration with the DEP, so we're going to want to be aligned and make sure that New Jersey has the best chance at receiving funding and all the applicants. I should also mention that NJTPA is hosting actually a webinar on December 14th on e-bikes. So if you're interested in e-bikes, feel free to join.
If there's a link for that you want to put in for registration, you can put that in the chat. Thanks. So let's just make sure everyone knows we're just taking a couple minutes right now, just 5 or 10 more minutes to get clarification questions on the presentation that was given, and then we're going to open it up for your questions and comments. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Okay. So Ellen Silverman asks, how would you find out if your county will be applying for the planning grants?
So
Go ahead.
Don.
All right. Well, I think you can reach out to your county. We at the NJTPA, we represent 13 counties, and we have been informing them of this process, and we plan to work with the various representatives for the counties. So,
Great.
but yeah, I think your best bet is to reach out to the county themselves, their planning office, and
Doug, was there something you wanted to add to that answer?
No, I think that works. Yeah, I was going to say just reach out to the counties.
Okay, we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to get through them pretty quickly because I know we're going to have a lot of other people who want to give comments. Leonard Drucker asks, would any of these grants have the potential to support off-road and on-road equipment?
Yeah, I think definitely in the cards, as we start to see where the communities want investment, then that is really going to drive a lot of our understanding. There are programs already in New Jersey to electrify some off-road and on-road, but the expansion of those programs is definitely on the table. So it's definitely in our minds.
Great.
Yeah, and I would second that. Yeah, we're looking into it as well.
So I think, Doug, you probably said this, but I might have missed it. The deadline for comments for DEP is December 4th, right? But and I'm also wondering if that's the same deadline for NJTPA.
We haven't set a deadline, but we may. But the sooner the better. That's our stance.
And I think the way DEP's worded is, it's not necessarily a hard and fast deadline, but it's a strong preference because the agency has a lot to turn around in a short period of time.
Correct.
Yes.
Marge, other clarification questions?
Yes. Let's see. Sorry. I believe I heard from Chuck Feinberg. Hi, Chuck. Chuck believes he heard these grants are to develop short-term priority actions. What's meant by short-term?
Good question.
So it's sort of determined by a bit by the EPA's notice of funding availability for their implementation grants. Is there they want to fund measures, priority measures that show emissions reductions by 2030, and that's what scored the highest in their implementation grant scoring process. And then also look at measures that will reduce emissions by 2050, but the emphasis is really on emissions reductions by 2030. So short term would sort of be any type of action that could be implemented before then, and create or affect emissions reductions in a sizable way by 2030.
Got it. We have somebody asking about partner programs at DOT, like Safe Routes to Transit, Bike Ped program, and will e-mobility programs also include things like e-bike incentive programs, which have been used successfully elsewhere?
You mean, Marjorie, is the question, are those programs eligible for funding?
I think so, yeah.
Well, technically, I would think that they are. I think it depends on what the
They are,
state,
right.
yeah, decides to.
Yeah, and I think one umbrella statement we can make, which we've made in the other webinars, is if you're asking a question that's like, would this be eligible? Would this be funded? The answer is going to be, it's going to depend on what the actual specifics of your application are. I don't think either agency can really comment on specific proposals right now, but they can talk about it sort of conceptually in terms of overall eligibility.
But I think what we
Right.
heard was, if it's something you think is important, put it in your comments.
Correct.
So that's another question. Our incentives for stationary
Real
storage.
quick on that before we move on.
Okay.
One thing I would add is that if you're a town or municipality who wants to fund e-mobility, you are eligible as long as you have a overarching PCAP that you find yourself in. So there's planning grants, and then that goes into the implementation grants. So there is room to partner with a higher level entity to bring e-mobility into your community, but that is going to require engagement from you as a municipality or the county, maybe into the MPO or into the state, so that we can all align and understand, great, you have e-mobility, let's add that to New Jersey's PCAP, let's add that to NJTPA's PCAP if you're in that area, so that we can show the EPA that we know that there's funding coming from each of the different levels, if that helps.
Thank you.
Flesh that out.
Great.
And Marjorie, I see you have a patient hand raised.
Right, I do, but I thought maybe we'd get through some of these. But I'll go ahead. Salma Ibrahim, I'm going to unmute you and you can ask your clarifying question.
Hi, I did comment. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, I did comment it, but I just wanted to double check. I noticed that a lot of the projects listed on the PowerPoint are projects that are addressing publicly available technologies and vehicles, as well as obviously programs that already fund like publicly available items. Are projects like private fleet charging completely off the table because of the community focus of the CPRG, or is the New Jersey DEP open to those suggestions?
Yeah, I don't think they're necessarily off the table. We need to focus on things that will benefit the community, but if it's, a private fleet reducing emissions in a way that benefits the community, that's still something we would consider, just based on how much public feedback.
That's a good example of where you're asking a question, but you may want to turn it into a comment, right? That if you're suggesting that private fleets that benefit the community should be eligible.
All right, thank you so much.
Any other clarifying questions?
Yes. What role is NJDOT playing in development of the plan?
In the development of the PCAP,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this effort is being led by DEP, we're the lead agency. So we are in charge of developing it, but we are trying to coordinate with the other agencies. to the extent possible, you know, reaching out to them and making sure they are also involved.
Okay, thank you. So Doug, I'm going to let you reiterate this. I'm not going to answer it for you, but someone is not completely clear on exactly what they're being asked to comment on. Is the PCAP grant already approved? Is the PCAP grant being used to develop the next phase, or does PCAP include implementation activities?
So the PCAP grant, in the sense that the state of New Jersey, received a grant to do this type of outreach, to plan for the 3 different deliverables that we have to submit to the EPA. So that has occurred. There is now an opportunity, sort of 2 concurrent things: the implementation grants, which are open, entities can apply for the implementation grant funding until April 1st. To implement projects or priority measures that are included in a PCAP. So we have to stakeholder and hear what the priority measures that local municipalities, counties, MSAs would like included in the statewide priority climate action plan as those priority measures that they could go and then apply directly to the EPA for, join a coalition to apply to the EPA for funding for, or you can submit a comment to say you would like, you know, the DEP to apply for or submit, get in talks with with any other eligible entities to apply for implementation grant funding for a particular measure. So that's really what we want to hear, is like, what are the priority measures that are those short-term implementation ready measures that you want included, and that could include some specific projects in this sector that you would like to see or you'd like to apply for funding for. Does that help clarify things?
Marjorie, do you think we're moving past clarification at this point?
I think so. We do have one question from John Ridgey, who is our
Hi,
John friend from DOT, but I think that maybe we can ask John's question and then get to the next.
Okay, go ahead.
So John, if you want to raise your hand, I'm happy to unmute you, but what John is asking is about whether or not you're talking about the decarbonization of emitting vehicles / transit, or in the construction / maintenance of assets, such as paving a road, fixing a bridge, laying down replacement track.
So I think it's more of the former, the decarbonization of emission of vehicles. However, infrastructure, specifically charging infrastructure, is also going to be vital. So it's not necessarily the built road environment or the actual physical, roads themselves, but it's more the vehicles on that road that we would want to fund, and then the infrastructure associated with the movement, charging, and maintenance of those vehicles, we would also like to fund.
Yeah, basically, whatever we are proposing needs to show emissions reductions. So if it's something that, we can show a clear emissions reductions pathway, that's something we'd be looking at more than maintenance of an existing feature.
Okay, Jean, I think
Good.
we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everyone, what we'd like to do now is we're going to take about 55 minutes to really try to elicit from you some of your input for DEP and the other agencies to consider as priorities as they develop their plan. So we're going to just ask a couple prompt questions to try to, get you thinking and giving input on some particular topic areas that DEP's identified as of particular importance to them to get feedback on. However, you're clearly an advanced group and you're already giving lots of input. So thanks so much for that. So, and I will also be putting the questions in the chat so it's easy for you to see. And you'll also be getting a follow-up email with the questions, and that will also point you to where you can find the recording of today's webinar and the presentations. Okay, so these questions you'll be seeing again in a follow-up email since you registered for today's webinar. So the first question is about what are some of the transportation measures that are priorities for your communities, and community in the broadest sense of the word. That doesn't necessarily mean a neighborhood or a municipality. It could mean in your county and a geographic space. It could mean for your demographic. It could be for your interest area. And again, to emphasize what is being looked for are transportation measures that are priorities that are high priority, that are near term, and that can deliver emissions reductions, measurable emissions reductions, is the priority. So again, first question is, what do you think are some of the priorities that should be included in what DEP is considering? And thanks for sharing that slide. And these questions are also in the chat. So we'll give you a second to think about that question. And again, you can raise your hand and Margie will unmute you, or you can put comments in the chat. We know that you have ideas on this subject, so we're going to just give it a second.
And then also, Jean, there's a question about whether or not the participants list will be made public after this webinar.
We have not been making the participants list public. What we will do is everyone who registered for the webinar will receive a follow-up email.
And someone is also asking about contact information for the panelists. Follow-up email. So I don't know what the policy is there.
That might be something that DP needs to think about offline, I guess, and we can put in a follow-up email if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I believe the way if it's about CPRG, then we'd just like it to go through that formal submission process. And I think you can indicate in there, like, you specifically want to follow up, and then we can reach out to you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, same with the NJTPA and the MSA.
Okay.
But we also have an email, a general email that people can submit to.
And maybe you could put that in the chat.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so what are the priorities? What are the high priority actions that should be reflected in this plan that are near term and that will deliver emissions reductions, measurable emissions reductions?
I don't see any hands and I don't see up. Okay, so we have a comment from Leonard Drucker. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Supporting heavy duty off-road that help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in disadvantaged communities. And we have somebody in with their hand up. I'm trying to find here. Oh, Bill Barron, I'm going to unmute you. You may speak.
Hi, yes. There are a number of programs that DEP already has working, the state has working, which are underfunded. These include the BPU incentive programs for electric vehicles, the installation of charging stations across the state. That these programs need to be fully funded. They need to be accelerated in their implementation phase. Otherwise, we're not going to reach our goals.
Thank you, Bill.
Electric school buses, for example, also included in that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Stanislav Jaros says transportation priority, education of the public on the benefits of driving electric, dispelling myth, guiding on EV selection, understanding how vehicle efficiency plays role in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other priority measures? Transportation sector?
Let's see. Somebody else have their hand up. This is slow. Chuck Feinberg. Hello, Chuck. Go for it.
Yeah, hey everybody. And thanks for doing this, everybody. This is great. Just to follow up on Bill's comment just now, there needs to be an alternative. As you guys know, I've been at this for a long time, and I'm a big proponent of electrification, but electrification is not available to everybody now. So if we're talking short-term priority actions, yes, we need to fully fund the electric school bus program, but for every school district in the state to transition their fleet to electric now, that's just not feasible, and that's not feasible in the short term. So for those school districts that are not able to fully transition their fleet to electric, there has to be another alternative available to them other than gasoline or diesel. So I think we need to look very seriously about other alternative fuels that will be less polluting and less greenhouse gases than gasoline or diesel, but perhaps not zero emission like electric would be. So I'm talking about renewable bio-based fuels that could be drop-in fuels in many cases. So it's an easy transition. I don't mean to put this out there to delay electrification, but I put it out there as another alternative on the road to 2030 and to 2050.
Thanks, Chuck.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Good to hear your voice. This is possibly Chris Sturm, but possibly Zeke Weston, because Chris was working with music, so I'm not sure if Chris is still on or not. But increased support for bike lanes, complete streets, and mixed-use trail networks in dense areas. We also have heard from Daniel Haubin. I have a few municipal clients who are interested in operating local transit connector buses, but have or are concerned that these programs won't see a lot of ridership. Mario Caballero says a no-cost option for municipal fleets to install EV charging infrastructure. All incentives today only cover a portion of the expenses to install EV charging stations, and municipalities don't have the budget to cover the rest. Melissa McCutcheon reinforces e-bike incentives, exclamation point.
And I just want to offer a follow-up to Daniel Haubin's comment, because what Daniel sort of said was he's got some municipal clients that are interested in running these kinds of transit connector buses, but there's a concern that there won't be a lot of ridership. So Daniel, if you have thoughts in terms of how to address that challenge that you want to offer as a comment, regardless of whether that's today or through the DEP website, that might be really helpful if you think that there's some actions and measures that could be taken to address that potential challenge that you think should be considered as part of the program. That would be helpful.
So Jean, I don't see any other
priorities. Okay.
I don't see any other action, so maybe we're ready to move on.
Okay, so the next question, question 2 that we're focusing on is, and in some ways, Daniel sort of gave us the transition over to this, which is for the kinds of suggestions that you just gave, and also for some of the measures that DEP and NJTPA outlined, what are the challenges that might limit or constrain the implementation of those measures, such as costs or availability of workforce? It could include in some of our other webinars, things like education was identified as a big challenge, and or if there were sort of local regulatory or zoning kind of challenges too. So
okay, we
go
have
ahead, Marjorie.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to somebody with their hand up.
Yep, that's Bill. I can let him talk.
All right.
Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, yeah, following up on, electric school buses, DEP has restricted its grants to limiting to purchase as opposed to lease or other innovative funding sources, turnkey operations such as Highland Electric. and also restricts to new buses and does not allow school districts to fund repowers. All of these can reduce the costs and make it easier for school districts to migrate their fleet to electric. So they should look at those.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Perlman, hello, Jeff, has sent Daniel Halbin a note that if you have municipal clients who are interested in shuttle services or first last mile connections, please reach out to the relevant MPOs. And that's from our friend Jeff Perlman at NJTPA. Daniel Halbin says many people inside and outside of government don't fully understand the benefits of EVs or other AFVs environmentally or cost of operation. Melissa McCutcheon says the prioritization of large single occupancy vehicles over all other road users. Leonard Drucker says knowledge of data and how much particulate matter diesel off-road equipment emits, particularly TRUs, that is not included in any of the off-road sector in the programs offered.
Can we clarify what a TRU is?
Yes.
For the record.
Unless one of the DEP or Xenon can clarify that for us. Let's see.
Transportation refrigeration.
Right, yes, great, thank you. Mario Caballero says costs and municipalities not having the resources or expertise to manage the operation of EV charging and fleets internally. For question 2, Stanislav Jaris says the challenges are fear of change, deliberate spread of misinformation, cost of EVSE networking, which is a result of utility not being able to sell electricity directly via EVSE. And I don't see any hands up.
We can give it a minute. It sounds like, similar to some of the other sector webinars that we hosted, that issues associated with lack of awareness, need for education seems to emerge here as well. Any other thoughts on associated with the kinds of measures that you'd like to see in the climate action plan?
So Lisa Yakaman says heavy duty EV trucks are prohibitively expensive, especially for owner-operator truckers who comprise the majority of the trucking workforce at the Port of New York and New Jersey. We need more funding to defray the costs. We also need more infrastructure capable of charging these trucks. Also a comment, thank you for focusing on the need, let's see, to set more manageable short-term goals. We need to take action on the measures that are achievable quickly and work on long-term plans for the more challenging issues. Thank you. And let's see. Bhavya Ramgiri says supply chain issues. It takes a lot of time to order and then get it delivered to the site for installing. Also, although the grants help in purchasing charging stations, but installing them, like construction grants, are not sufficient to cover up the entire project cost. Keeping 97% uptime is also challenging. And Mola Saros put into the chat for folks the Greater Philadelphia MPO, the DVRPC, including the 4 Central South New Jersey counties, is here. And she said, get involved with them, including with their CPRG work here. So Mala is providing some additional information for folks. That's it so far, Jean.
Okay, great.
Well, yes, we also have Stanislav Jares as agreeing with Lisa on cost. Passenger EVs are 10 to 50% more expensive versus gas. Electric trucks or buses are 3 times more expensive, also relaying to Chuck Feinberg's comments on e-school buses, very expensive.
Great, thank you. And it's very helpful for you to
reinforce.
Reinforce someone else's comments. Thank you. It's helpful to understand how that all kind of comes together. Okay, so let's move on to another topic of discussion. one of the demonstrations that the agencies need to make when they prepare their priority climate action plans is to demonstrate how the measures that they're proposing contribute to the benefits associated with equity, with equitable transportation, an equitable transportation workforce, and then also associated with creating benefits for overburdened communities. And so it's important for the agencies to be able to document what on those kinds of issues. So our first question here that you can see up on the screen, and I'm putting in the chat, is how can some of the ideas that you've suggested today or that have been outlined by the agencies contribute to an equitable transportation workforce? So this is really kind of the workforce question. And so really the issues here are how can the workforce be enhanced, developed, sustained, retained in ways that advance carbon reduction strategies? And then also, what are the most challenging issues facing development and maintenance of that workforce? What kinds of training is needed? What kinds of wraparound services might be needed for particularly when we're trying to expand workforce opportunities for people in disadvantaged and overburdened communities?
And Jean, I put that up, you threw it in. Okay, so it's in twice. I was just trying to help you out.
No, it's all good. So again, for the next couple minutes, we'll focus on workforce development issues. What are the opportunities associated with the kind of measures that are being presented today, and what are the challenges and solutions to addressing those challenges?
No one yet.
That's okay. We'll give it a minute or two.
Yeah.
Can hum a
We
few.
need Stanislav Jara says we need lots of electricians.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa Yackerman says, one consideration is the need for specialized training programs for all of the mechanics that will be needed to service these EVs and charging stations. We should seek grants to establish community programs to create workforce development in these areas. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm going to raise the next question because it's a bit related to workforce development, right? So as I mentioned, a demonstration that the agencies need to make to be able to receive EPA approval for funding associated with the CPRG program is demonstrations associated with workforce development and delivery of benefits to disadvantaged and overburdened communities. So the next question relates to similar to the workforce question that's on the table, is what do we see as the potential benefits from some of the measures that have been talked about today, whether from all of you or from the agencies? And when you think about benefits, you can think about it very broadly. Benefits can include improved public health. It can improve increase resilience to changing climate conditions. It can improve increasing access to opportunities to build wealth, whether that's through jobs or through education. It can include improved community beautification and the public health benefits that come from living in vibrant communities. It can include decreased transportation costs. So what are some of the benefits that can be delivered by the measures that have been discussed today? And if there are negative effects, how can they be mitigated?
Okay, so question 4, Stanislav tells us, Stanislav Jaris says, air quality, improved health, lower cost of fuel, lower noise levels. Thank you, Stanislav.
In some of the other sector webinars, some participants provided help by pointing to different studies that could help with the demonstration that the agencies have to make. So if there's something that you want to share in terms of your own work or other work that you've seen, please feel free to put that in the chat too. So we'll give this a minute to percolate.
Bill Barron agrees with Stanislav. That's helpful to know. Stanislav tells us there are studies by Rutgers professors on diesel particulate matter health. These particles cross into the bloodstream and even the blood-brain barrier. Sorry, no specific reference here, but thank
It's
you.
okay.
We can find it.
We'll hunt them down. Thank you. I think just sort of another way to think about this question about benefits, both public health, but also workforce development, is whether the measures that have been talked about, including the ones recommended by all of you or discussed by the agency, think about whether there's a way, is there a way that those measures could or should be implemented to maximize benefits?
So Leonard Drucker says supporting all types of heavy duty equipment going zero emission can help improve public health, as well as the increased resilience to climate change. This also helps support microgrids in warehouses that can potentially save or create power. Thank you. Bill Barron tells us negative concerns could include job loss, for example, mechanics and owners of gas stations.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, let's move on to the next question, and then we're going to open it up then. And I'm sure that this question will elicit a lot of response. So for this question, what we're really trying to hear from you all on is whether there are ongoing initiatives, measures that are related to transportation that could be expanded with CPRG funded, but again, keeping in mind that these need to be projects that are in the near term that are ready to go, and that preferably could be expanded in the near term to expand the scope of and impact of the program beyond current programming years. So what's currently going on now that might be bright spots that can and should be expanded as part of the funding that will be received for this program.
And Jean, I'll just let you know that Stanislav Jaros had one other
Oh, okay.
response to question 3.
Thank you.
And that gas station attendants will be losing jobs. So jobs like electricians, EV diagnostics, and basic service, plus other jobs like home efficiency will be new opportunities for them.
Thank you. So again, current question on the table is, what are existing ongoing programs that should be expanded that we think can be done in the near term and that can deliver measurable emissions reductions and benefit disadvantaged communities?
So Stanislav notes Charge Up New Jersey, but notes that with a question mark.
Question
So
mark.
I don't know, Stanislav, if you want to clarify what you mean by your question mark. And Leonard Drucker talks about NJDEP. Arla Sosa says funding support for NJDEP would be welcome. It's been a very successful program that's been able to reach a lot of small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stanislav says the state program uses
Charge Up.
uses $30 million, and it's political to add more money into Charge Up New Jersey. So okay, Lisa Yakman says truckers at the port use an equipment street turn program to avoid unnecessary trips to the port, but they are charged fees to do so. If we could defray the fees, it would encourage participation, reducing traffic and congestion. Lisa will submit comments with additional details. Thank you. And Leonard Drucker says, drive green for medium and heavy duty EVs. NJDEP is following in California's core program, however, is missing key equipment as well as infrastructure support. And Bill Barron says, expand and accelerate charging station installation and make funding for EV incentives stable so it doesn't have to stop 4 months after it opens. Melissa McCutcheon says, to question 3, actually, we're kind of bouncing around here, Jean.
That's okay.
That's all right. More good union jobs. Question 4. So many underserved communities are already using low emissions transport, but benefit the least from clean air, affordable clean transit, etc. The health and safety of these captive users should be more protected. What do communities regularly using low emissions transport out of necessity want to see implemented? Can we reward their ongoing environmentalism rather than convince wealthier people to change their behavior? Bhavya Ramgiri says clean fleet program for municipalities serving disadvantaged communities. And John Ridgey says funding towards CMAQ projects and ITS/traffic signalization improvement projects to improve existing traffic locations and signals with upgrades. Little to no construction infrastructure needed.
Thank you.
And Bill, missed one. Regina Towns, as a retired longshoreman, I witnessed coworkers suffering from strokes, asthma and heart attacks, aneurysm and cancer. Bill Barron says, implement utility make-ready programs that have been proposed but waiting for BPU approval for 2 years.
Thank you, Bill.
I don't see any hands raised. These are all very helpful, folks.
Super helpful. What I'd like to do is to kind of open it up for the next couple minutes, and sort of ask my standard wave your magic wand question, which is if there were things that if you could wave your magic wand to identify as priorities for what you'd like to see incorporated into the priority climate action plan, and that would then become eligible for funding, what would those things be? Again, keeping in mind that they need to be near term, benefit disadvantaged communities, which can include create jobs, and that have tangible emissions reductions. So what would those things be?
Oh, right. Yes. Thank you, Stanislav. Folks, make sure that you put your comments to everyone, not just to the hosts and panelists. Thank you.
And that's because then they're in the recorded chat and on the record.
Yes. And also all of you each can see them as well. Keeping us honest.
Any other thoughts on magic wand? If you could wave your magic wand, what would be the things identified as priorities?
Lisa Yackerman says, shuttle buses to improve public transportation access for workers, especially in disadvantaged communities, to reduce cars on the road. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Okay. So I'd like to
One more. We have
Oh,
two
go
more. We
ahead.
have two more
Go ahead,
things.
Marjorie.
All right, Bill Barron. Stable funding source for New Jersey Transit operating and capital expenses.
Almost gonna say, I can't believe we haven't heard that comment. So
Yes.
thank you, Bill.
And Regina Town says air monitoring needed in Port Newark and Elizabeth.
Thanks, Regina.
And Stanislav is giving us an answer to question 5. Educational campaign on social media for the public.
Thank you, Stanislav.
Okay. And Lisa Yackerman would also like to see airplanes at Newark Airport have more accountability.
And maybe Lisa, if you could elaborate, even if it's in the chat, on when you say accountability, do you mean accountability in terms of like transparency associated with
For their emissions
portfolio?
for their
Okay.
emissions contributions.
Thank you.
So, yeah. But I don't know if DEP wanted to comment or NJTPA about the breadth of where that line may or may not be drawn
In terms of airport?
Yeah, in terms of what is eligible for funding.
Yeah, and I was wondering the same question, Marjorie, on the comment regarding monitoring, whether something like monitoring is even eligible under EPA's guidance. NJTPA or DEP, do you have any wisdom on these questions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I think that projects typically have to show reductions. So, I mean, I don't know if you could potentially include some sort of monitoring in a project that shows reductions, but I think that.
But the question would be about, I think one of the questions is really about where do airports fit into the whole system,
Sorry.
right?
Yeah,
So-
I think he was answering my question about monitoring, whether
Right,
that was
yeah.
ineligible.
Yes. So, I mean, I guess in terms of who is eligible, you know, that you have to look at the EPA's website, but I believe it's, you know, municipalities, counties, which count as municipalities, states, tribes. So it's typically public entities. I think that, you know, if the state was to potentially create a program that, you know, help provide funding for, you know, the Port Authority, to help, because the Port Authority has some role in the airport, or, you know, funding for the airport, that could be potentially a project. So that's how you could potentially get money to private operators.
Got it. Did anybody from DP want to respond? Doug shaking his head no.
Just that it has to be something that we have the authority to do, is one of the big things. So, you know, we don't directly regulate the airlines, I don't believe. So I don't know that we could directly do something, but something that, like Zenon mentioned about, like, you know, providing incentives is something we could possibly consider.
But it's duly noted now. So, and Lisa also mentions that Lisa agrees with Stanislav regarding educational campaigns. And Daniel Halban says, not sure who would be best to implement this in New Jersey or if it's even an existing program, but I've read that some states are offering generous buyouts of people's older, higher emitting cars to encourage them to buy more fuel efficient vehicles. And if I'm recalling, I believe we used to have some program at New Jersey called Cash for Clunkers. Do you remember that, Jean? That shows you how old I am. But I don't know if there is
You are
such a
showing your age. Yeah.
I am showing my age. It's been a long time since I worked at the
I think
state.
that was a Obama administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of our DEP friends have any wisdom on this kind of a program.
I don't know of any existing programs, but definitely something to consider.
Okay, I don't see any hands and
Okay.
I don't see any more, but
Yeah.
we're close.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is to turn it back over to Doug Benton from NJDEP, who can just give a quick summary of next steps. And then from there, we can see if there's any other remaining questions from there. Okay.
We
Doug?
do have one last comment here. Lisa
Okay.
Yackerman does say we have a truck replacement program through the Port Authority, New York, New Jersey, that could be used as a model for something like that. So
Okay.
thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Doug, next
Yeah.
step?
Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Marjorie. So thank you all for attending today and for being such active participants in the meeting. We've received a lot of comments and questions, and we also, again, want to encourage you all to submit your written comments, maybe more detailed written comments, to us through our comment form on our webpage. And so when I say our, I'm referring to New Jersey's DEP CPRG program. And so you can see the link for that as the first link here. Go to our page, we have a comment form where you can select, the topic of your comment. So if it's related to transportation sector priority measure you want to see included in the PCAP, you can tell us that. If it's a comment about something else, you can also let us know, as long as it's related to the CPRG program. And we would like to have those comments by December 4th. That way we can prioritize reviewing those comments for the development of our draft PCAP, which we'd like to release around January. That's not to say we won't accept or review any comments that you may submit to us after December 4th, especially given the scope of the entire CPRG program involves several more deliverables like the comprehensive plan. And then I'll give a plug for NJTPA. Their website is listed here as well, and Zenon mentioned the different ways that you can submit comments and engage in their planning process. So we don't have any other stakeholder sessions for CPRG scheduled at the moment, but our webpage is the place where you can check back to see if one is scheduled. We also have a listserv, or basically an email sign-up list, so you can sign up to receive updates about the process. I encourage you to do that if you have not done so already. And thank you, Marjorie, for dropping the link in the chat again. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's it.
So just last call in terms of comments. Okay, remember, it's not really a last call because you can still submit comments through the portal on the website that Marjorie put in the chat. Again, to the extent that you can do it by December 4th, that would be ideal. And we highly recommend that you sign up to be on the listserv so you can get updates as this process moves along fairly quickly. So on behalf of the DEP, NJTPA, and the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center, we want to thank you for joining today and taking time out to participate in this important conversation. Again, I've seen it a couple times in the chat, so we'll remind you, you'll get an email as someone who registered for this webinar, probably in the next 24 hours, that will let you know when today's recording and the transcript for the chat, as well as the PowerPoint presentations, are made available on the CPRG website. Okay, and again, that's also the same website where you can submit additional comments through the NJDEP portal. Great. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day. Take care.